Wow, good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the Enoch Pratt Free Library. My name is Vivian Fisher, and I am Deputy Chief of the Pratt Library State Library Resource Center here at the Central Branch. This evening, we are pleased to have Christian Cooper in conversation with Lisa Snowden McCrae for this Writers Live event. But before I introduce our guests, we have many exciting upcoming programs that can be found in our Compass newsletter, our Pratt webpage, and on our social media pages. We are looking forward to having Wesley Lowery here on July 6th at 7 p.m. to discuss his latest work, American White Lash, A Changing Nation and the Cost of Progress. So we have some of the programs for July and August outside, and we have a copy of Baltimore's Beat that's outside as well. So don't forget to get your copy. And also, we will have books out for sale in the hallway, and the author will sign books after our 15-minute Q&A at the end of the session. So, Christian Cooper is an American science writer and editor and one of Marvel Comics' first openly gay writers. He created Marvel's first openly lesbian character, as well as the first gay male character in Star Trek, which was nominated for a GLAAD Media Award. He also edited a number of X-Men collections. Mr. Cooper is the author and creator of Queer Nation, the online gay comic. In 2023, Random House published Cooper's memoir, Better Living Through Birding, Notes from a Black Man in the Natural World. He is currently a senior biomedical editor at Health Science Communications, and in 2022, National Geographic announced that he would host a show on their American TV channel called Extraordinary Birder, which reveals the wild, wonderful, and unpredictable world of birds, which aired June 17, 2023. And by the way, it is a beautifully it's beautifully produced. Lisa Snowden McCrae is the editor-in-chief and co-founder of the Baltimore Beat. She is a former editor at the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore City Paper, and the Real News Network. Her writings has appeared in numerous publications, including Essence, the Washington Post, the Baltimore Magazine, and the Audubon Magazine. Please join me in welcoming Christian Cooper and Lisa Snowden McCrae to the Pratt Library to discuss his latest work.
Hey, y'all. It's a lot of you, and I know it's not for me. I'm really excited to talk to Kristen today. I just finished reading the book actually today, and it was a super great read. If y'all can pick it up, you should. Especially, I read a lot of it by the pool, so I could also look up and look for birds.
I was going to say, you should watch it someplace where you can look for birds.
So yeah, we can just go ahead and get started. My first question is that you are in the land of the Orioles and the Ravens. I know we talked a little bit.
I saw a raven today. I went to the National Aquarium while I had some downtime. And as I came out, I saw a raven fly overhead. I'm like, oh, I didn't know they had ravens.
Nice. Are there birds also at the aquarium?
Yeah, they have a rainforest exhibit where they kind of take you up into the forest. I was like, okay, this is odd for an aquarium. But I'm all about the birds, so I'm good with it.
So also we were talking backstage, and I know you just came from Philly. So I need to know if you are choosing your tour dates based on bird mascots.
Well, I haven't been to St. Louis, so no. No, it was sort of a straight line down from New York, stopping off in Philly, and then down to Baltimore. So I think that was I think more the overriding concern, though. It's been fun. I did get to bird in Philly, not here in Baltimore, besides the raven that flew overhead. But I did get to bird in Philly and got a life bird, a king rail, which I'd never seen before. So I was very
nice. I know that a book tour and all the other things that you are doing keep you really busy. Are you able? I know you talk a little bit in the book about how birding can kind of go everywhere. So do you make time, intentional time, to look at the sky, to go to spaces where you know that birds are going to be, where you're hearing from the other birders where they are?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm sure every birder in the room can probably say something similar. I don't go someplace without packing my binoculars because, you go someplace new and there's new birds to be seen. And God forbid you should be walking around and you're like, wait, what's that? I don't have my binoculars. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Which happens enough anyway. But at least if you pack them, you can run back to your hotel room and grab them and come back. So yeah, no, and especially if I'm going overseas, forget it. It's like, all new birds. Opportunity for lots of life birds. The binoculars are coming with me, and I will find time. Like I went to Paris with my ex before we were exes, and the binoculars came because I was like, all right, I'm going to be in the middle of Paris, but I know there are parks, and I will go to them. So.
Are there also opportunities to kind of link up with other birders when you're traveling to different cities?
Yeah, a lot of times you can reach out through various different networks. I know when I went down to Australia, I put a call out to anybody who was willing to take out a neophyte to the Australian birds and show me some of their stuff. And someone stepped up and did it, which was great. You can, look up organizations that run groups in these places and go with them. So. In fact, when I was in Philly, I ended up going or being out. We were supposed to go out with In Color Birding, which is an organization in Philadelphia specifically trying to diversify birding. And but unfortunately we got rained out.
So I got to know you through the incident in Central Park. You had an unfortunate encounter with a white woman who didn't like that you didn't want her dog unleashed and threatened, used the police as a weapon, basically. Before everybody else knew who you were obviously a brilliant person for a lot of different reasons. I want to know what it feels like to have all the things that you are, some kind of reduced by internet or international fame. Like what does that feel like?
It feels weird. Just sort of to suddenly have that spotlight felt really bizarre. I don't think of it like that. It's interesting because I'm old, I'm 60, and so I'm sort of like, I'm over it. I'm like, I know who I am. I know what I like. I know what I want. I know what I want to do. It's not like I'm some starry-eyed 20-year-old who's like, ooh, fame and fortune is coming my way now that the spotlight is here. It's like, I'm like, whatever. So That made it different. And I knew what I was about. I knew what I cared about. I knew what I had been working for all the years previously. And this did not change that. What it did do, and this is why I say I look at it differently, it gave me an opportunity to do those things in a bigger way, on a bigger level, and to reach more people. So, the way I always try to say it is, I have always been fighting for justice for Black people, equality for queer people, and our wild birds safe and sound for all people. And that was before, and that's now. I just get to do it more. So it didn't reduce me. It just gave me a chance to be more me.
Yeah. I think a lot about how we're all adjusting or not adjusting to life post the lockdown portion of the pandemic. I know that COVID is very much still real, but we've really endured a lot these last few years, especially people in marginalized communities. There's, still actively now, there are many wars being waged against Black people, brown people, queer people, just for being who they are. And so
Florida.
Yes. And so I think about the ways that we have to figure out how to be okay or kind of like make it to the next day. And you write in your book about the way that birding really helped you in a lot of ways. It was a place of solace for you. Can you talk a little bit about the way that that's what you talk about in the book and the way that birding can sometimes help soothe us from all the strains of the world?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I am especially hoping that with the book, with the show, more Black and brown people will get out birding, because we need it more than most, because we have a lot of stresses and pressures on us from the society that, a lot of other people don't think about. They don't realize. And that was kind of what happened with that incident blowing up, going viral. It blew up and went viral because people were like, oh, this really happens? Even in New York, in a liberal city like this, it's like, really happens. Things like this happen to us, not every day, but, various things, various levels happen to us on a pretty much daily basis. So when you have that going on in your life, I think more than ever, you need something to get you outside of yourself, to get you immersed in the soothing, the calming, the tranquility of nature. And I don't know a better way to do that than to experience it through birds. Because when you're looking for birds, you got to be focused. You got to be aware of movement so that you can find the birds. You've got to be listening so that you're cueing into the sounds. And when you're doing that, your focus is not on you anymore, and it's not on your woes, and it's not on your problems. And suddenly you're engaging on a very intimate level with a much bigger, much vaster world, and learning about that world and finding out how you fit into that world. And when all of that is happening, all the cares and worries just kind of, at least for a little while, just kind of slide away. And that was really important for me as a queer kid who knew he was gay from the age of 5, because, that had to be locked away back in the 70s, because no way could, you be openly gay in the 70s in junior high or high school. And I think it's something that not just Black people, but especially Black people could benefit from. And I think all people could really benefit from. So I really hope a lot of people pick up birding from the show and from the book.
Yeah, I know you talk in the book about how you were always, even though it wasn't specific to birds at first, but you always were in tune with nature. Your family would always pack up and go on these trips.
Yeah, that was my dad, because he was a science teacher.
Yeah.
So nature was definitely big in our household when we were growing up.
For people maybe here in Baltimore City that are looking, that maybe don't have that same background, or who are looking to maybe convince other people, because I'm sure that lots of you folks are already sold on the idea of birding. Do you have any ideas for maybe helping convince folks that this is something that they should do, that it's important to step out of your life and look at something else, or, look into the world outdoors?
I don't know if I can convince anybody that's important. I can convince people that it's easy and that they can do it, even if they're living in the middle of the city, because I live in the middle of Manhattan. And there are no excuses. The birds are there, even in the middle of Manhattan. And the story I love to tell is going up onto my roof, and there's a big red-tailed hawk was sitting 2 roofs down. And I hear this click, 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 and there's an American kestrel, our smallest falcon. and it's dive bombing this red tail because it does not want this red tail in the neighborhood. And it's actually two kestrels sort of doing like a tag team wrestling match. One goes at him and then stops, and the other goes at him, and they're doing this. And the poor red tail's like, and then suddenly the kestrels stop. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? What's going on now? And then I hear, cack, 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 cack. And a peregrine falcon, our biggest falcon, comes swooping in, and he starts going after the red tail. And the red tail's like, and the kestrels are like, oh, we're just sitting this out. We're going to watch it happen. So, and this is going on above everybody's head, in the middle of the East Village, you see a concrete and brick. So, there is bird life all around you. If you think a city doesn't have it, remember that your city has rats and pigeons, if it's anything like my city, and that is prey for owls, for falcons, for hawks. So we have an abundance of birds, even on our city. So listen, look, get out there, take it in. You will only benefit from it.
I also think, as a fan of the Real Housewives franchise, you did a great job. I had no idea that all this drama was happening.
Oh my God, I was
above
like,
our
bring me
heads.
the popcorn. I'm just gonna sit here on my roof and watch the show,
So you did a great job just now convincing. So you wrote a book about what you love, the love that you have for comic books, for birds, for Black people, for queer people comes through. For me, I do a lot of writing. It's not always about directly what I love. And so there's kind of a way to divorce myself from the work that I'm doing. How do you tackle writing about yourself and writing about these things that are so much a part of you?
It was hard because I'm used to writing fiction, and when you're writing fiction, when you're writing fiction, you are the master of your domain. Everything is under your control. A life isn't like that. A life is like a whole bunch of, random things coming at you, and you don't have control of not even half of it. So how do you tell that in a coherent way? How do you tease out the themes and sort of, bring the important stuff to the fore and show how it all kind of weaves together, if it weaves together? That's what made it super hard. The fact that I was writing about what I loved, I think made it easier. If you can bring passion to what you're writing about, I mean, God forbid I should ever write about something I don't care about, because I'll bore myself to tears and the person reading it will be bored. And that happened frequently in my comic book work. I wasn't trying to necessarily, break new ground or anything. I was just writing what I knew and what I loved. One of the things I did was writing a horror comic called Darkhold. There were three main characters. The super main one was a lesbian, just because I know lots of lesbians and they kick butt. But one of the other main characters was an elderly Black woman. And nobody puts elderly Black women in comics as a main character, but I was like, my grandmother kicks butt, and I'm putting her in the comic book. I wrote what I loved, what I knew. So I think that made it easier, not harder. What was hard was getting me to explain the emotion behind it. And a lot of times my editors were constantly going at me because I would write, and then this happened, or I would sort of, they called it eliding over the emotional content. And I'm like, yeah, that's all you're gonna get. I'm a wannabe Vulcan. I don't do emotions. And they were like, no, you're doing emotions. And so they were like pulling teeth on that, but they got it out of me.
How long did it take you to write it?
I want to say it was almost a full year. And that was mostly because I was lazy. The life can throw so many distractions at you.
So you write a lot in this book about growing up, knowing, as you said, that you were queer from very early. And you write a little bit about how these strict confines that you put on yourself, I mean, not just that you did it on your own, but that was the world that you were when you were a child. Can you talk a little bit about that period and the things that you write about them?
Sure. I mean, going back to the Vulcan metaphor, for those who don't know Vulcans, they are one of the star beings in the Star Trek universe, and they are all about logic, no emotions. Mr. Spock, famous Mr. Spock, was half Vulcan, half human, and that was the problem, because the human half was always trying to get all emotional. But that was my roadmap. That's why I keep coming back to that Vulcan thing, because, you know, if I let any of my emotions slip as a kid, you know, if that queerness leaked out, it was social death at best. So it all had to be kept carefully controlled. So, you know, that's why Mr. Spock became my roadmap. He kept it all under lock and key and was this brilliant, nerdy intellectual, and I was aspiring to be a brilliant, nerdy intellectual. I was like, that's it. That's my hero. That's who I want to be like. So, and it's interesting because when that incident in Central Park happened, that's what I defaulted to. When stuff was getting messy, I was like, ooh, I'm getting stressed out. Time for the Vulcan, because he's going to be calm and is not going to get emotional. And I just like went back to that. And I've lost the train of the original question.
No, you were totally on the train.
Okay.
My follow-up to that was going to be, I identified with that. I grew up in a very, very religious household. So if I wasn't exactly what, you know, my parents had decided that God wanted, then it was all the other parts of me I had to kind of hide, but also very nerdy, very immersed in books. And so I think about the people that might stumble upon your book, maybe hopefully not small children, but medium, maybe like teenagers or young adults that are still kind of grappling with those same, you know, figuring out how to be themselves in a world that doesn't make it super easy. Are those the kind of people that you're thinking about? Were you thinking about those kind of people when you were writing the book? Do you think about people that maybe you might even help set free?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if there's one, I think, there's not one message, but I think one of the main messages that comes out of the book is when you discover those quirky, weird, difficult, don't fit well with the rest of the world pieces of yourself, you don't want to iron them out. You want to hold on to them. You want to nurture them. You want to give them full reign eventually, because they are what are gonna make your life fulfilling and happy. You know, whether you become a huge success in some field by doing it or not, even if you're doing it just as your hobby, it's what's going to make you happy. And I say that because before all of this with the show and the book happened, you know, I was working 9 to 5 in the grind at Health Science Communications, editing pharmaceutical advertising. Not the soul fulfilling thing that writing comic books was, which was truly soul fulfilling. But I did that for over 20 years, and I do have to correct just the idea that I still do it because I don't do it anymore. I quit. But when I was doing that, the whole time I had the burning. In fact, one of the reasons why I stayed at my job was because they knew that when spring migration came, for those 6 weeks, from the middle of April until the end of May, I would be late to the office, and they were okay with that. And so I was able to, I gave my passion full rein, and I birded like a maniac for those 6 weeks of spring migration, and it fulfilled me. It got me happy. So if there's a message, it's when you find out what those weird bits of yourself are, hold on to them and nurture them and let them give you fulfillment in some fashion.
You talk in the book a little bit about those periods when birding is happening. And you say even on that morning when you encountered the woman, you were like, I was looking crazy, basically. Like you were like, your hair wasn't cut. You can you talk a little bit about your routine?
No, routine.
Your lack of routine.
The routine is to get up, get out as early as possible, and get to the park, preferably right at dawn. Because I'm what they call an ear birder. I rely on my ears to help me find the birds. I sort the sounds, and you can blindfold me and drop me any place in like the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and I can tell you what's there just from what I hear.
Wow.
So that's how I bird. And first thing in the morning is when you get a phenomenon called dawn song, where very often all the birds, for whatever reason, right before dawn or right at dawn, there's a chorus of them all singing. So I want to be there for that because that's my table of contents for the day. Like,
Wow.
oh, there's this, and this here. I'm gonna go find them. So yeah, my routine is to get up like at 4:30. The subways run terribly at that hour, so I've got to leave myself enough time to make sure I am in the park no later than 6, somewhere between 5:30 and 6, depending on how late in the spring it is, because that's when dawn comes. So laundry doesn't get done, housekeeping doesn't get done. I don't know how I got away with it for so many years at the office, but I would wear the worst possible sneakers I could get away with and still go to the office in, because they would get muddy and dew soaked. And, you know, I haven't shaved, you know, I haven't cut my hair. It's not pretty.
I was hoping that you would know why they were so loud in the morning. You said they just
I
like
don't think
it.
anybody has quite figured it out. I have not. And if someone out there does know, please during the Q&A say, they figured out Dawn's song. This is what it's about, you adult. But I don't think they have, not to my knowledge.
It's a secret that the birds are keeping
It's a
from
secret the
us.
birds are keeping for now.
Another thing that I was thinking about reading your book and knowing kind of the promotion and production around it. You're somebody that has passions that you've been able to nurture and grow for a long time. Ivy League graduate, brilliant man. And you would be these things regardless of what happened that day in Central Park. Is it a struggle for you? Is it frustrating for you to know that kind of you have these identities that are also linked to a brilliant person? Or do you feel like those things are kind of wedded together?
I think there are so many people like that out there. You know, I think there are so many people doing so many extraordinary things. And in fact, I got to meet a lot of them when I was doing the show, Extraordinary Birder. That's why it's called Extraordinary Birder. It's not about me. It's about the people we meet out in the field. Some of them are regular old birders. Some of them are degreed biologists, but they're doing amazing, extraordinary things. And they're unsung. I think most people go through life doing extraordinary, amazing things, and it's unsung. So I don't, the way I look at it is, I'm super lucky that whatever I do, you know, that people appreciate has gotten some attention, but there are so many people doing amazing things. I mean, one of my, Chris Alieri, who I met when we were doing the show and we went out to the Rockaways in New York, and he is just a regular birder who took it upon himself to organize other volunteers to protect a bird called the piping plover. And if you know the piping plover, it is the cutest, most adorable ball of feathers you've ever seen. And it nests on the beaches, and it nests on the beaches of New York. Yes, New York City has beaches. But the problem is, the people come in the summer just when they're nesting, when these chicks need to get to the water to feed. And so there's gotta be some give on our part if these birds are gonna continue to survive as New Yorkers. And so Chris Alieri started on his own this program, got these volunteers and got them out there to try to convince people, you know, just change your behavior a little bit please during this time of year so that these birds can survive. Nobody's singing his praises. We sang his praises in the show, and I'm singing his praises now because his praises deserve to be sung.
Yeah.
But I think there are so many people out there doing so many amazing things, and I am fortunate that if people appreciate some of the things I do, that they get sung. But yeah. I think my job, especially in the show, is to sing other people's praises. My job is to facilitate, to communicate, to get as many of those songs out there that are so incredible and that should be heard by people.
Yeah, I identify with that a lot. I mean, my question was kind of selfish because I spend a lot of time, I have a paper called the Baltimore Beat, which is primarily a Black paper here in the city. And I love it. I love it. But sometimes I also wish I could write about things that are not like the police killing Black folks or Black folks being denied resources. I'm glad that I have the space to do it. But I also am like, I would love to write about beautiful art or, you know what I mean? Things that are not so heavy. And so it's like a gift and a curse. And in the same way, I'm like, at least I have the paper where I can elevate other folks.
but there's our joy to write about too.
Mhm.
You know, I think we don't want to reduce ourselves to just, you know, things like the incident. You
Yeah.
know, my whole attitude was with the incident was, you know, people said, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your trauma." I'm like, what trauma? It takes a lot more than that to traumatize me. She does not have that much power over my life. And in fact, you know, after it happened, I was like, as soon as that dog was on the leash, I was like, video recording done. Thank you. Goodbye. Going back to birding. Because that's why I got up at 4 a.m, not to deal with the likes of you, but to get out here and look for birds. And I went back to it, or tried to. You know, I was nervous. I was rattled. My blood pressure was high. But, you know, so keep doing what you're doing at Baltimore Beat. But please make sure you throw in some of our joy.
Yes, absolutely. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the TV show?
Sure. For those of you who haven't seen it or don't know about it, it's called Extraordinary Birder. It's from National Geographic. It's on Saturday evenings at 10, late for birders especially, on Nat Geo Wild. So every Saturday there's a new episode, or you can stream it. All of it is available. All 6 episodes are available to stream on Disney Plus and Hulu. And what it does is each episode we go to a different location and we look at the birds and people issues and how that brings us into conflict or creates some opportunities, and how we can do better. So that was tremendous fun because as a New Yorker, I'm a stereotype. I don't drive. So there's a lot of birding places in this country where, you know, you might want to go, but you got to be able to drive. And so, you know, Nat Geo called me up and said, yeah, would you like to do a birding show? And, you know, we'll take you to all these places and, you know, you'll have to tell people about them. And I'm like, must I? So, you know, they're taking me to all these places. We went to, well, you know, we did my hometown in New York. We did another place I'm very familiar with, Palm Springs, California, and other areas nearby in Southern California. We went to Alabama, which is my favorite episode of all, because it was going back to my family roots, because we're all Northern people for several generations, but you go far enough back in any African American's ancestry, and we have roots in the South. And my dad's roots were from Alabama, and I had never been. And I was like, I'm never going there. You know, as Black people, we have to be concerned about where we go, where we can feel safe, birding, you know, being in an isolated area by yourself in a rural or wild setting, you know, and peering around at things in binoculars. Some people are not going to take that well.
Yeah.
So you've got to be aware of that. But we went to Alabama and it was awesome. It was, of course, about birds, but also the collision of that with civil rights history and with family history. So it's just really fascinating experience. And then we also went to Washington, D.C., which should be a state. Y'all in Baltimore, please push for that. Push for that. Puerto Rico, and boo-hoo-hoo, I had to go to Hawaii. So, yeah. So it's a lot of, hopefully it's fun. Hopefully you guys will like it. Hopefully it will get people birding.
So in Alabama, what happened there?
I had gone a year before at the invitation of Alabama Audubon. And at first, you know, my reaction was, my people left there for a reason. I'm not going back there. But then I kind of thought about it. I'm like, if I'm ever going to go to Alabama, there is no better way to do it than in the sheltering protective arms of Alabama Audubon. So I'm like, all right. And plus it gave me a chance to get some of those Southern specialties, like brown-headed nuthatch that, you know, I wouldn't be able to get since I'm nervous about going down to the deep South on my own to bird. So I went, and the experience was so interesting. You know, some of my preconceived notions were wrong. Some of my expectations were off. Some of my expectations, I know, were not that off. But it was just so interesting and so many parallels. I'll give you an example, because you're like, parallels of birding and Black experience. What is that? So my family left Alabama, came north. Because of part of the what's called the Great Migration. Industrialization in the north opened up opportunity, economic opportunity, a chance to raise your kids away from all the mess in the south and with a lot more possibilities for the future. That's exactly what birds do every year. When they migrate, when they
Wow.
leave the south, they're coming north because there is opportunity in the north with all these bugs and flowers and fruits that they can exploit that resource. It's opportunity for them to better be able to raise their young, to pass on a better future to the next generation. That's the same word is used, the Great Migration and migration. You know, the difference is with bird migration, it's seasonal. It's every year. This seasonal abundance in the north brings them back, but it's the same idea. So that parallel and things like that you wouldn't necessarily think about, that was really fascinating for me. So that to me was the most personal and the most important episode.
Makes me think about Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison and all the allusions to flight in the book. In the book, there's like a myth about these Black people that can fly. They jump off these cliffs and they fly. And she pulled that from different other myths that were here in America about the Black people that were able to fly away and escape.
And again, that's another reason why I think we should be birding.
Yeah.
We Black folks should be birding because birds are the ultimate symbol of freedom. And nobody's worked more doggedly for their freedom than we have. So we should embrace the symbol because, you know, they have no limits. They go anywhere.
I want to talk a little bit about comic books. I am not super familiar with comic books. My entry point is Black Panther, because I was going to the movie with the Black guy that was a superhero, and I liked seeing all the pictures online of people dressing up. But what I do know is that we've had more opportunity to experience a greater diversity of what superheroes look like in the last maybe 10, 15 years, with Black Panther, with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's from Baltimore, writing comic books.
He's a big reason why Black Panther took the shape that it did, you know, on screen, because of what he did in the comic books with the character of Black Panther.
So talk a little bit about your work with comic books and what you've seen, you know, as a Black gay man working in comic books.
A lot of change over the years. Things have gotten better. At one point, there was an entire division of DC Comics that was devoted to bringing more diverse heroes into the marketplace. And certainly, we're starting to see it in the films, certainly in the Marvel Universe films. For example, the character of Nick Fury, and everyone just accepts that it's Samuel L. Jackson. Well, Nick Fury in the comics is actually an old white guy with an eye patch, and you know they just made it Samuel L. Jackson because he's a cinematic badass, and the character is supposed to be a badass, and nobody batted a single eye. You know, it made sense for the character.
I know enough to laugh at that.
So yeah, it's changing. Comics is changing, and the other wonderful thing is that the people who make comics, that's changing. So you know there are Black artists, and there are Black writers, and there are Asian writers, and there are trans writers, and so all these people are bringing new perspectives and new characters, and that only helps.
Okay, so we have 5 more minutes. 2 more questions. Number 1, what are some of maybe like the top 3 birds on your list that you gotta see?
Gotta see. You want 3? Okay. Top 3. Great gray owl.
Okay.
Never seen it. Big thing, big yellow eyes, and a beautiful mottled gray pattern. Let's see, another one. I would love to see whooping crane. I've never seen the whooping crane, and there's a migration of cranes, not just whooping cranes, but also much more abundant sandhill cranes that passes through Nebraska at the Platte River every year, and it's supposed to be an incredible sight. I've never seen it, so I would love to see that and get my first whooping cranes that way. And let's see, one more that's on my itching to see it list. Well, say I knocked some off recently that I was really itching to see. If there was one more, I guess it might be, That's a good question. Oh, no, I know what it is. It's the gyrfalcon. I have never seen a gyrfalcon in the wild. I've seen a captive bird. Actually got to touch it. I touch its feet, which was kind of cool. But it's the biggest falcon in the world. It is Arctic, so it does not come down very often. And 2 times in my birding life have they come down to, once to someplace in Westchester, once to my old stomping ground on Long Island. Chased them both times, didn't get them. Went to Iceland twice, didn't get them. So yeah, that's my nemesis bird right now, is probably the gyrfalcon.
Your nemesis. Okay, last question. Throughout the book, you have little birding tips sprinkled throughout. Hopefully people read the book and they get all of them. But what is one that you will give us for free?
If I had to give one, I don't know if I don't know if I made it a birding tip, but I'm going to make it one for this audience, which is, and hopefully a lot of you are already birders, but if you're not, just get out there. Don't worry about binoculars. I mean, if you can get them, great. I have never bought a pair of binoculars in my life. All my binoculars have been either hand-me-downs or gifts, because they're expensive. It can be a barrier to entry for a lot of people. Don't worry about it if you don't have them. Just get out there and observe, look and listen. I say get out there. You don't even have to leave your house. So if you have mobility issues, go to your window and look out your window, or maybe have somebody put up a feeder for you and watch the birds come to you. But just look and listen and engage with the birds, and it will lift your perspective. It will change your perspective, and I don't think you'll regret it for a single second.
It's cool. It's cool how birding really translates to whoever you are, whether you have mobility issues.
In the Puerto Rico episode of Extraordinary Birder, we have one of the contributors, one of the guys who shows up in the episode, is a blind Puerto Rican birder. He cannot see. I think I'm an ear birder. He relies entirely on his ears and sorts all the bird sounds. And they use that because they have recording devices in the forest, because nobody can be monitoring the forest 24 hours a day, but they can record for 24 hours, and then he can play it back and listen to it and pick out, and that way they can know exactly what has been in the forest for complete coverage based on what he hears. It's remarkable. And this is one of the reasons why we say birder and not bird watcher, because you don't even have to be sighted. You can just use your ears and you can be a birder. So engage with it. There's nothing to stop you except yourself.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I got 50 more questions, but I couldn't ask. So now we're going to throw it to the audience.
We have about 15 minutes for your questions. If you could stand up and come to the microphone, this microphone or the one over there by my colleague. We have audience who's watching online. This way they can hear the question as well. We'll start right here.
Howdy, Christian. Name is Camille Foster. I'm a journalist who's been tracking your story for some time and actually did some reporting on it. One of the things that you discussed recently in an AP interview was that encounter with Amy Cooper in the park, and you described what happened there and your behavior specifically as a kind of in your face. And when I interviewed Miss Cooper some months back and talked to her about that incident, what she said was, if there was one thing that she should say to you, she would explain that you scared her. That is what she would say. And I don't know that most people are aware, and I'm curious to know if any journalist has ever asked you about the 2 previous encounters that you had in the park in the months before you met Amy Cooper, where there was some sort of physical altercation with other dog owners. And it does seem to me that that kind of colors, that knowing that would perhaps color things in a slightly different way in a lot of people's perspective. If they knew, for example, that you did, in fact, threaten her.
Okay.
There's,
Well, all right. So when we're talking about that incident, there's 2 things to remember. One issue is, the dog walker versus the birder, which is a common theme in the ramble. The other is the racial aspect.
Thank you.
When it comes to the dog walker versus the birder, the story begins and ends with, was her dog on the leash like it was supposed to be in that protected part of the ramble? And it wasn't. And, I tried to nicely tell her a couple of times, it needs to be. But that's where the story begins and ends. As far as, how she interpreted things, I never approached her. I never physically threatened her. I was not holding anything in my hands besides the dog treats and the iPhone. And that's what annoyed her, was the iPhone. She was angry that I was recording her. So make of that what you will. I talk about the incident in the book. I talk about those other two incidents you mentioned in the book. So read that chapter. It might give you some perspective. But the bottom line comes back to she chose to inject race into that situation where it had not been before. And that's on her. And, maybe it would have been nice if it had turned out a different way. I don't know. I can't, in retrospect, look back. A lot of good things came out of what happened there in terms of people being aware of the racial bias that runs through our culture. So I don't know if I would even want anything to change if it would stop that revelation from coming to people. But that's basically it. Does that answer your question?
Hello. As a white woman who birds, it took me a while to realize that Black people do have a problem with being in the outdoors, and why that was, and understanding that. And then as a direct result of your instance in the Central Park, the question that comes from me is, what do I, as a white woman who's out birding, do to encourage Black people and not discourage Black people? What behavior would be important for me to be cognizant of when I meet Black people when I'm out birding, and for Black people in general? Or for instance, let's say if I was a white person who was there the day that at the Central Park, to know what to do.
The most important thing to remember is, and I hesitate to use this word because a lot of people take it the wrong way, but that as a white person, you have a certain privilege in society. That's not to say that, you walk around with, feeling more superior than anybody else. It's just that society it has some built-in advantages that it gives you. And if you can use those advantages to make sure you've got the back of Black people in the field with you, that's great. In fact, yesterday when I was in Philly, one guy talked about how he won't bird in certain parts of Philly unless he has his white shield with him, which I was like, all right, that's one way to put it. But the idea is not incorrect. That as a white person out in the field, you can go out of your way to make sure that people who aren't white who are out there feel comfortable, and to make sure that if something does arise, you have their back.
Why did you decide to bird?
Oh. Why did I decide to bird? When I was about your age, I put a bird feeder up in the backyard and filled it with birdseed, and all these crows with red in the wings kept coming to the bird feeder, and I got all excited because I thought I had discovered a new species of crow. And as it turns out, it was a bird called the red-winged blackbird. So I hadn't discovered a new species, but it still remains one of my favorite birds. And that started the ball rolling. I wanted to, find out more about these strange creatures that were coming to my backyard. And once I started down that path, I got sucked in. Do you bird? Good.
Yeah, hi. I'm halfway through your book, and one thing that surprised me is how funny it is. I mean, I am just laughing out loud a lot, like at the Marvel part, and even one part in when you're talking about birding in Central Park and the character, like your friends there, and the way you describe them, the descriptions are so vivid, and all these folks are so different. But what in your decades of birding, what have you observed to be maybe similar traits throughout, your birding friends?
Ooh, similar traits. I can't even say a tendency to get up early, because while I'm on the dawn shift, there are birders who, come in the afternoon, and they're almost like an alien species to me. Well, no, and it's interesting because on the rare occasion that I do go into these very familiar parts of the park in the afternoon, and I'm totally disoriented because the sun's in the wrong place every place I go. So I'm used to positioning myself so that the sun is behind my back, and I'm putting it in my eyes instead. So is there one common trait to all the different birders? I gotta say, and this is eccentric. I heard somebody say it's eccentric, yes, and also maybe. And this maybe is unique to Central Park, because I understand it's not that way with everybody and in every birding place, but there's a certain degree of kindness that everybody shows. And I have to say that even outside of the Central Park birding community, and I know it's not like this everywhere, unfortunately, but in lots of times when I've been out in the field, I've run into other birders. I don't know them from Adam. They don't know me from Adam, but the birds form enough of a common bond, at least for a couple of minutes, that, I don't know their politics, they don't know mine, I don't know their life, they don't know mine, but for a couple of minutes we have this thing in common that lets us reach out to each other and be kind to each other and share our excitement. It happened yesterday in Philly, where me and the guy I was birding with, who had brought me to the reserve, saw this guy who all of a sudden started going, and we're like, okay, he's got something. And we walked over and it's like, King Rail, and now we're going. So it was a lot of fun. And so I think there's a certain kindness. I wish it was everywhere. I know it's not, but maybe we can make it that way.
I just have a quick birding question, and I so appreciate everything. I'm a birder myself, but I'm enjoying this very much. And my question is, I read an article in the New York Times and about they're seeing this bird called the anhinga, but they called it the devil bird appearing. And I lived in Connecticut, so I went back up, and I'm more familiar with the cormorant, which of course is like related. And I did not see the anhinga anywhere. And I wondered, since you're more an expert, like what you think of that. Did you see the devil bird like up in Central Park? And this is just, yeah.
I've seen anhingas. I have not seen anhingas in New York State. They are very, very rare in New York State. They're normally found much further south. I did not see the Brooklyn bird, but I think maybe because I've seen anhingas in a lot of other places. My mom is from Trinidad and Tobago, and so I would visit her down there in Tobago and see anhingas, fairly regularly. But no, I did not see that bird. But good for you for making the effort.
Okay.
It's your gerfalcon.
Thank you for explaining Don's song. It might inspire me to be a little less casual in bird watching, or birding, I should say. It occurred to me, because a friend mentioned this, and I don't know if it's correct. How come you didn't sue Mrs. Cooper?
Oh, what would be the point?
Well, she has plenty, but this is your
Yeah, no,
forum.
I mean, her life imploded. It would just suing her. What would I have to gain? It would just seem like piling on. And plus, that's as far as I was concerned, that was done when that dog got on the leash and I walked away. That was it. It blew up, but I'm not still there. In fact, people ask me, when you're in Central Park and you're in that part of the park, do you think about that? And I'm like, no, I don't think about that. I think about the mourning warbler that was there 15 years ago that we all got to see, for a week out in the open. And mourning warblers are skulkers, for those of you who don't know, and hard to find. I think about the scarlet tanagers I saw up in the tree, like, the day before, whatever. So I don't see any gain to the world or to me in doing that.
All right. Did your bird watching help your workday writing, or how does it help any of your writing? Or your birding, I should say.
Yeah, no, the birding is an impediment to getting writing done. Oh my God. When I was supposed to be writing the book, I'm like, it's a book about birding, so I should go bird. And I'd be out, So, it's I don't know if there's a big overlap or collision between those two pursuits, except for maybe inspiration.
Thank you.
Once more, I want to take this opportunity to thank Lisa Snowden McCrae. And Christian Cooper. And so now you're going to buy books because you can't get your library book signed. It never gets old, Sophia. Every audience loves it. It always lands, pardon the pun. My colleague Sophia will be outside. She'll be the beginning of the line. You can get in line. Dreamers and Make Believers is selling books. They're our local on-site independent bookstore. And then the Patterson Park Audubon Center is here. They have an info table out here. So I saw a stuffed owl. I don't think it's the owl you were looking for.
No, it's a barn owl.
It's a barn owl. Sorry, guys. It's just, but please check it out. We'll be out there in about 5 minutes. Thanks again for coming.